My name is Aaron Zimmerman. I'm the rector of St. Albans Episcopal Church, and I'll be walking through this presentation with you. The purpose of this presentation is to inform the congregation about the master plan, the needs and opportunities it sought to address, to update you about the building progress to date, as well as to look at what will be required as we move forward, and hopefully to hear from you what your priorities are for the future and what questions or concerns you have. In other words, we want to cover how we got here, where we are now, and where we're going. Before we begin, it's important to remember why we're doing this. Our mission is to proclaim to all, through word and deed, the grace of God in Jesus Christ. And this building project is not just because it's nice to have new buildings. It's because we need to have the facilities that will allow us to enable our mission. If we want to proclaim God's grace, it doesn't work very well if our campus is not accessible or it's not welcoming. It's difficult to get in and to find your way. Those with mobility issues have had a real challenge navigating our campus for a long time, for example. It's also not very gracious to invite people to a space where we can't all fit when we gather. So buildings are a tool, one of the many tools we use to accomplish the mission that God has given us. And the reason we are embarking on this project, the reason we have embarked and are continuing on this project, is to enhance and live into our mission. And that's what this is for. So, how did we get here? Our story begins in 1946 when some Episcopalians in Waco, under the encouragement of the bishop, launched a new church on what was then the outskirts of the city. That was in 1946. On Palm Sunday, we had a rented space and had our first service, but within a few years, we began building the buildings that we would use. This is a picture of the parish house. It was the first worship and office space that the church had. It still exists today. And by the early 1950s, we started building the church. It was built in two halves. The part that was built first was where the altar is currently located. That was in 1951. And then by 1953, we'd added the part with the bell tower and the balcony, that part that you enter when you visit St. Albans today. There was a large building project in our first 10 years. They were intent on focusing on building a school. That was an important part of our founder's mission. And so St. Alban School was built, again, starting in the early 1950s and continuing for several years. And it would be added to and renovated several times over the years. It went from a small two-story building to then adding an addition and then connecting that to the existing campus. In the mid 2000s, the St. Albans School was closed and it was transitioned into becoming the St. Albans Outreach Center, which is the building many of us know and use today. It houses our children's ministry, our youth ministry, AA meetings, and a number of other community events, in addition to being the long-term home of the Central Texas String Academy. We are now in a phase of a lot of growth and change. You can see here a picture of Dina Harrison greeting a large number of children, which ministry to children has always been a big part of who we are. You can also see behind Bishop Harrison our original altar, and behind that a wooden reredos, and that was added in the mid-1990s as part of our 50th anniversary campaign. The stained glass window that now is above the altar was part of that as well, as was the carpet, the red carpet you can see on the floor of the church. Also, as part of that campaign, the school building, now the Outreach Center, was connected to the existing campus. In 2016, we launched a capital campaign. In 2018, we broke ground. Now in 2019, we're continuing that. This picture shows the groundbreaking. The rope held there by our members was used to outline the new space that we would have before Bishop Harrison then broke ground. Now, we did have to do the groundbreaking inside. That day was a rainy day, and the construction site was a muddy mess. And so showing the kind of creativity, resourcefulness, and ingenuity that has long been characteristic of St. Albans. We just moved the groundbreaking indoors. St. Albans continues to be a place that serves so many in so many different ways, and also a place where we invite people to serve. And there are over 60 ministries listed here. We can't name them all. Many of those are things that affect everybody, our worship, our music ministry. Some of these things are things designed for smaller groups of people. Of course, our small group ministry, our young adults ministry, our Meet, Pray, Run ministry. One of my favorites that you can see on the upper left, Theology on Tap. We've done that 4 times over the four annual times we've done Theology on Tap, covering everything from art and science to religion and philosophy. And we have grown from having 20 or 30 people to now this past year we had over 130 people for a really engaging discussion on church trends. But whatever your ministry is, whether it's serving our Adopt a School partner through Waco ISD, Cedar Ridge Elementary, whether you mentor incarcerated youth through Revision, or whether you're someone who loves coming to morning prayer or our men's Bible study or Chill Grill or any of these things, we are a place of real involvement in the community, spiritual growth, and service. One of the other things that has been true for St. Albans over the last several years is that we are in a major time of growth. Our average Sunday attendance now is averaging over 300. That is up 91% since 2013. That number puts us in the top 10% of parishes in the Diocese of Texas. But it's not just what happens on Sunday morning. Another example of the growth is our children's ministry, which has tripled and actually more than tripled since 2013. So that's where we have come from. That's a little snapshot of the life of St. Albans. But where are we now? In 2013, as I mentioned, we started this master planning process. It began among a conversation with vestry members and parish leadership, thinking with the growth of Waco and the growth of the church, we needed to think long-term about our future. What would be the best way to arrange our campus? We knew the buildings were aging. We knew the facility had some challenges, but not just repairing what we had, what would make the best sense for us to serve our community, our church, and to fulfill our mission. Here you can see a picture of the rear of the church campus, which is what you would see when you parked in the parking lot. It's certainly very unattractive. You can't actually see the front door. It's hidden. There's a staircase. That's the only access into it. The door is actually on the side of that parish hall. You can see the exposed utility poles and just the old fencing that hid some air conditioning units, which were quite loud, and just not a very welcoming space. Of course, when it was built, this was there were houses on this property. The parking lot was not there. There was sort of a back alley that went behind the campus. And so when it was built, there wasn't really thought to how this would look. But once this became our parking lot, this became the front entrance for a lot of people. The first thing they saw when they got to St. Albans, and they'd have to park here and then walk around to the front of the church to enter. Or they could, if they were able to navigate the stairs and find the front door, the side door, really for the parish hall, they would get in, but then have to navigate a maze-like campus to get wherever they might want to go. It was confusing for new visitors. It was difficult for many of our members who had mobility issues. It was not ideal for a lot of reasons. So we started the master planning process with an architecture firm and a master planning committee. And I really identified 5 things we need to address in this master plan. First, the growth, and we've talked about that, but we needed more space. We couldn't fit in our parish hall if all of us wanted to have a meal. When we had our 70th anniversary in 2016, we had a wonderful meal, but people had to eat in shifts because we couldn't all sit down and eat at the same time in our parish hall. We ran out of office space, and so we had staff members who were scattered around the campus as opposed to one central office. And this affected our other ministries as well. AA, thankfully, has been successful and powerful and meaningful for many people, but we were having 70 people meeting in a room that was built for 40 on the upstairs of the outreach center. We also needed to address welcome and flow, and this was a big idea, something we heard a lot from the congregation. What I've talked about before, the no front door problem from the parking lot, the confusing and unwelcome layout, poor access for those with limited mobility. We had somebody, by the way, who was at one of our meetings in the midweek meetings in the parish hall, and this person fainted, and the paramedics were called. The ambulance arrived, but they weren't able to get the stretcher into the building because, again, there's no ramp on that entrance, and they had to carry the person out uh, um, just by hand. In addition, we were invisible essentially on Waco Drive. Most people who weren't members at St. Albans would drive past us and not know we were here. And we felt like it was important to announce to folks that they were here, we're a church, and we're here to serve the community. The third reason was to preserve our historic campus. The organ was clearly an issue, the instrument was aging, and we began to realize it wasn't necessarily a good fit for our current use. For either Sunday morning worship or for the Sacred Arts series or other performances that we offer throughout the year. The stained glass needs repair and preservation. Beautiful stained glass imported from Germany in the mid-1950s and finished in the early 1960s. A real treasure of our church, but needs some attention. And there's a lot of wear and tear in the church. The carpet is stretched and worn and coming up in some places. The pews are scratched. The walls are another issue. Those cinder block walls were a temporary sort of stopgap measure. The plan was always to plaster the walls, but that was not done to save money in the short term, and we've left them that way. And they present an acoustic problem for the church now, as well as an aesthetic one. So there's a lot to address: electricity, wiring, and which leads us to the fourth thing: aging and outdated buildings. Again, everything in the outreach center was first built in the 50s, and the church itself also built in the 50s. There are no grounded outlets in the church. The lighting is rather dim. There was no space for hospitality. When families would gather for weddings or funerals, baptisms, families would gather before these events. There was no place to put them. They would have to just gather in what was then the music room, and try not to disturb the facilities there. But it just wasn't a very welcoming space. One other condition of our campus was the fact that there were 30 air conditioning units, a lot of residential units scattered throughout the campus, and some commercial ones, but to heat and cool the space. We were not fully compliant with the Americans with Disabilities Act. There's no elevator in the outreach center that prevents a lot of people from getting to activities on the second floor. And as I mentioned, the lighting, sound, and electrical work that's required in the Finally, and fifth, we felt we needed to prepare for the next generation to serve our children's and youth ministries with welcoming spaces, expand our Christian formation opportunities, and also make sure we provide more space to the greater Waco community. Organizations like the Community Race Relations Coalition, the Austin Avenue Neighborhood Association, and other groups that use our space. In summary, we want to empower our existing ministries, foster welcome for those outside the community as well as our own congregation, to unify our campus, to make it really exist as one cohesive, coherent whole, and also be ready for the future. A lot of growth is happening not only in St. Albans, but in Waco, and we need to have the facilities to meet that future. So what is the plan? Well, initially we had 4 phases, and you can see here an early drawing of what we thought we would do. You can see on the far right is a new parish hall and office building. It's a large building with a chapel. You can see it looks like a little church on the far right, tucked on the end there on Waco Drive. That whole building was originally phase 1. We were going to tear down the outreach center, buy the property on the rest of our block here, was the lower right of this picture, and build this new multi-use enormous facility. Again, offices, children's ministry, parish hall, all that sort of stuff in this one big building. The thought was then in phase 2 to renovate the parish house, that's that original structure of St. Albans, and to add to the front of it a porte-cochere, a circular driveway where you could pull up, be dropped off, have protection from the weather, and enter the campus in a new central lobby. And then to build hallways that connect that new space to the new parish hall and office complex that we would have just built. And then finally, phase 3 was to address the church, to renovate the church, to figure out what we needed to do with the organ and get that space updated. There was a final fourth phase that was seen as something we would want to do in the farther, longer term, which was to build a community center, gym, multi-use space there down on that corner of 29th Street and Waco Drive. So those were the original four phases. And when we presented to this congregation, they said, we love the idea of a new parish hall, but we really love the idea of a porte-cochere. And if we really had done phase one as it's shown here, as you can see, we would have had that wonderful big new parish hall and office complex, but where you can see the porte-cochere, where the number 2 is on the screen now, we would still have our existing parish hall because that porte-cochere was not to be built until phase 2. Remember what that original parish hall looked like. So imagine this next to a brand new building. So the congregation said, wait a second, the porte-cochere is not until phase 2. We'll have a new parish hall, but no way to get to it. No central welcoming lobby. We need to address this now. And we heard that loud and clear from the congregation. So we took 4 phases and turned it into 3. We essentially combined part of phase 1 with phase 2. And this gave us these 3 phases, but really 2 main phases, the new phase 1 and new phase 2. So new phase 1 is the parish hall and the welcome center, meaning we put the outreach center on the back burner. We don't tear that building down. We don't build new offices yet. What we do build is the new parish hall, and we do the welcome center with that porte-cochere and that drive-up entrance. Phase 2 becomes the church. That is the highest priority after we get the parish hall and welcome center built. It's the space where we are every Sunday, and it's the heart of our church. And then phase 3 would be the outreach center and the gym. So those are the new 3 phases. We're currently in that phase 1. So what does phase 1 look like? What is the new plan? So let me go through the main features in a little more detail. So phase 1A, this is the first part. It's the parish hall. It involved removal of the present parish hall. That's been completed. Acquiring the remaining properties on our block. We've completed that. And then building a new 5,000 square foot parish hall, which is 50% larger than our current or now a previous parish hall. Large windows, new kitchen, outdoor cooking area on a terrace that's right next to the parish hall, an improved pantry, lots of storage, state-of-the-art audio-visual capacity, and massive storage also in a basement underneath the parish hall. Part of this phase was also to relocate offices out of the old parish house into new property that we bought on the corner of Waco Drive and 29th Street, a former law office, and we've completed that as well. Our offices are now located there. Phase 1B, the second half, is the welcome center, and that involves the building of the porte-cochere, putting new restrooms and new corridors that will connect new and existing buildings, the new welcome center and lobby and education space for children in the parish house. The idea here is to take that parish house, which is next to the church, right next to the courtyard, make that space not offices as it used to be, but make it ministry space that is usable on Sunday morning. So the idea there was to put our spaces for the nursery and the godly tots, meaning the youngest children, put that space next to or very close to the church as opposed to much more distant as it is now. So make it so that parents can bring their children and have them close to the church and use that space for ministry as opposed to offices. It also involves that new parlor and hospitality room, increased parking and drives, improve and expand the west entry to the church. That's that entrance that we plan to put near the baptismal font, near the lectern side of the church. Right now there's a real bottleneck in the front door of the church getting in or out before or after the services. That's really the only way in. There was a former side door, but it was poorly marked, and really it went into a closet that you then had to go into another door to get out into the courtyard. But really simplifying that, putting a clear, easy to use, wide doorway in the side of the church, moving one of the stained glass windows to enable that. And then building a dedicated music room so that the choir can again have their own space that they don't have to share as a hospitality or lounge room as we did for families. And then a new playground. So this was the old floor plan, and you can see here on the left, the church. The bell tower is in the upper left-hand corner of your screen. The altar area of the church is the lower left-hand corner of your screen. And you can see that star is Man Commons, just to orient you sort of what the sort of the center of the campus is now. You can see that long rectangular outreach center there with, Mann Commons is part of that whole complex. At the bottom of your screen, you can see the old parish hall and the rooms that were associated with that. On the lower right-hand corner, you can see the old, it was a State Farm insurance agency, a property that we bought as part of this plan. The parts, so there's the church, here's the old parish hall, here's the outreach center, here's the parish house. So again, this is our old felt. So let's walk, this will change. You can see here, orange means all the existing stuff that we had. Again, that yellow star is Mann Commons to orient you kind of around the campus. The church is on the left, parish hall is at the bottom, and the outreach center is on the right. This slide shows what will be demolished or renovated. The red area, the original parish hall down there at the bottom, that space that will be demolished and actually now has been. The original parish house sort of in the top center. Those red dashed lines mean that that's going to be renovated, and that is currently on. So this gives us all these new areas, which you can now see in green. And I'll walk through these in detail. But as you can see, the new parish hall on the bottom right is the biggest component of that. And then that porte-cochere right in the middle, that new welcoming lobby. So here's the new floor plan. First, just to orient you, here's the church. This is where now the new nursery will be here at the top in the old parish house. That nursery room there, and then above it, you can see the top of your screen is the Godly Tots room. And then here we get this parlor, which is along that corridor leading into the church. You get this welcome center, 900 square feet. You can see in the corner of the welcome center, there's a little pink space. That's a kitchenette, which allows us to serve food and drink and do hospitality from that welcome center. We really see this as a sort of central lobby, kind of a hub for the whole church, which allows us to have coffee hour between services. Previously, we didn't really have a space for it. That's why we have coffee set up outside the church after services, but we really couldn't have coffee hour in the old parish hall, for example, because that's where classes were taking place during Sunday school. So now this gives us kind of a casual space for people to gather and meet. So that's the lobby and welcome center. Of course, then here's the new parish hall. It's 50% larger than our old one, has capacity to have 200 people seated at tables, obviously much more than that if you do kind of rows of chairs, just like classroom style seating for classes and things like that. It's got a stage and audiovisual system, the kitchen on the far right there along that back wall. And all those blue spaces you see, those little blue rooms, by the way, are new restrooms, wonderful, accessible, ADA compliant restrooms. Here's a lobby that we added in the outreach center that makes sure that when we have all these new spaces built, there's still an easy connection to the old outreach center, just that circulation is not impeded at all, and access is clear and friendly to the outreach center. And we'll continue to use those spaces. What would it be like on a Sunday morning? You arrive on Sunday and enter right here where you see that gold star. That will probably be for many people the new kind of front door of the church, in addition to the church campus, in addition to the front door of the church itself. So imagine you park, you walk in, or you get dropped off, you arrive, you walk in to this welcome center. This is you can see here the door that you would have come in from the porte-cochere, a receptionist area to welcome you, and a place to gather. You can see then on the left-hand side of your screen an opening that leads to a beautiful, well-lit hallway that takes you to the parish hall as well as to the outreach center. On your right-hand side, now you can't see it in this representation, but there would be a doorway into the parlor, also a door that leads to the hallway, which goes straight to the church, as well as a doorway that goes into the hallway, which takes you in the parish house, the new children's nursery and Godly Tots spaces, as well as restrooms there for the congregation. If you were to go down that hallway that leads to the parish hall, eventually you'd come to this space, the foyer of the new parish hall. You'd enter down this corridor, this foyer. On your left would be the entrance into the parish hall. On the right, you can see the new entrance to the parking lot. Now, if you go straight down this hall all the way, you can see two doors in front of you at the end of this hallway or foyer. Those lead to a terrace, which is along the side of the parish hall, where our outdoor cooking space is and some green space. This is the new parish hall, or an artist's rendering of it, and you can see it's designed to be not only a place for fellowship, but also for worship, the centrally displayed cross. This will be perfect when we renovate the church itself, because we'll have to, for some time, be worshiping in this space. But we wanted to be clear that the parish hall, while it is a place for fellowship and gathering and teaching, it also is part of a church. Our old parish hall was fairly um, utilitarian. There was no indication necessarily that it was a church. Now, we did have some art on the walls that tried to communicate that there was a church space, but there was nothing about the room itself that said we are a church. So we wanted to make sure that that we fixed that in this design. You can also see two large flat panel screens mounted on the walls. This gives us the ability to show slides or films for teaching series or for family movie nights, but allows us to do so in a way where we don't have to have a projector that we have to move and set up, but you can just go directly to these screens. The nice thing about this as well is it does not obstruct the view of the cross and allows us, when we're not doing a presentation, to just leave these on to show informational announcements about the church or different events, as well as just to display art. So these become digital art on the walls that can show pictures of our stained glass windows or religious iconography, things like that. But they sort of blend in and are usable always, not just when we're teaching or showing a film. You can see on the left, there's a doorway that would go out into the playground area. Those windows on the left side will give parents and caretakers visibility of kids in the new playground area. The windows on the right would look out over on our office space and green space out there. And then, by the way, to the left and right of the cross, you can see two doors. The one on the left is the entrance to the kitchen. The one on the right is the exit to the kitchen. And again, that will be the place where we will be serving food. Just to give you an example of the major changes that take place in this campus, you can see sort of a before and after. At the top, that's our previous elevation there, the view of the campus when you parked in the parking lot. Again, exposed power lines, no clear entrance, and difficult for people who had mobility issues, versus the new drawing of what this will look like. Architecturally, it's tied into the rest of the church, no more stucco. You have lots of windows that, again, architecturally speak the same language as the rest of the church. You have a beautiful front entrance, and it's clear where you go. This is a view of the parish hall, the entrance. Again, clearly stating architecturally, this is a church space. And this beautiful limestone that will match the limestone that we use in our church building. Not only do we get new buildings, but the whole site has a lot of improvements as well. Better lighting in the parking lot. Right now, the only real lighting were a few lights that were mounted on old utility poles. The whole campus then becomes on essentially one level. There are a few places where there's some very minor ramps, but most of the new construction is built up so high that it's on the same level as the church itself. So it's a much more accessible and easily navigated campus. We bury all the utilities that I've mentioned, just to get rid of that unsightly, those eyesores. Increase energy efficiency. One of the things we're doing is adding HVAC units that will cool not only and heat and cool our existing spaces, but also the church itself. That space was run on 4 heating and cooling units, only 2 of which worked, and only 1 of which worked regularly, and is a real challenge. So we actually felt like, even though the church is phase 2, we needed to do that now, and that will also increase energy efficiency as well as the comfort in all of our spaces. And in these spaces, we're no longer using old or new residential air conditioning units, but we're using ones that are designed for commercial spaces like ours. Adding landscaping to beautify the campus. Access to the church and the outreach center from the parking lot. Again, that was a challenge in our old space. If you parked in the parking lot, you had to walk around to the front of the church or go down this alley to these red doors if you could find them to get into the outreach center. It was a very unwelcoming layout. And then many future-looking infrastructure improvements, everything from our sewer lines and plumbing to the data cables that bring the internet to our campus. A lot of these things are being majorly upgraded in a way you won't see, but you'll certainly appreciate when you're in this. So the path forward, where are we going? Well, we launched this campaign in October of 2016 in an exciting event. That night we launched, we announced $1.6 million in gifts. But at this point, we are now at a place where we've received, thanks to the generosity of both people in and outside of our congregation, $4.3 million, which is really an incredible accomplishment for a parish of our size. And this allowed us to purchase the property that was part of the plan. Those last two blocks or lots on our block. We now have the whole city block between 30th and 29th Street and Waco Drive and Columbus Avenue, which secures our property, gives us the flexibility we need for the future. We are able to select Barsh as our contractor to secure approval from the Episcopal Diocese of Texas to begin our project. And then we were able to break ground in September of 2018 in that ceremonial groundbreaking that you saw earlier with Bishop Harrison indoors, and then to begin construction. So that's what that 4.3 million has allowed us to do. Now, I did add a little side note here about the property that we acquired on 29th Street. This is 323 North 29th Street. It's across 29th Street from our existing offices. It's on that corner. It used to be an adult daycare center. If you are on Waco Drive, immediately as you pass St. Albans on your right, you would pass this building. This came to us, the owner wanted to sell the property at a really low price and approached us first. And we felt like we couldn't do it because we didn't want to use R1 Foundation funds for this since it wasn't part of the plan. And we didn't really feel like we had the funds elsewhere to do it. But we were sad to pass it up. But then a donor stepped forward and said, I will help acquire this, and it's, I think, important for the future of the church. And that person was 100% right, because this is a big property. It's on a half acre, and it's a 3,000 square foot space. It enables us to store, right now, we're storing everything that used to be in our old parish house and parish hall, currently under construction. Rather than spending over $1,000 a month to a storage facility to store those things, we are storing them now in our property. And it's a much better long-term approach. But it's such a big property, it gives us, again, a lot of flexibility for the future. It's important that the congregation know that this transaction was completed through the endowment fund, not R1 Foundation. We kept those funds separate. So this donor gives to the endowment fund, which is enabling the purchase of this property. It gives us more parking, by the way, more meeting space. We hope this fall, over the summer, to transition one of these rooms into a space for youth in the fall. We're still working out the details on that, but whatever we end up doing with this space, it certainly gives us a lot of flexibility. For example, once it is time to renovate the outreach center, and if we have to move any of those ministries or programs, we have this really enormous space to be able to do it. So back to the R1 Foundation. Phase one is where we are now. We're very much in the midst of construction. This month of May, as we're currently doing these presentations, we will continue the framing process, the exterior wall sheathing. That's the purple board that's going up now. In June, we will add and repair roof areas to these new spaces, the cladding, the exterior covering in these buildings, the continued framing of all structures, pouring the foundations of these new corridors to connect the Welcome Center to the parish hall, turning on and connecting the new utility service. In June and July, we're going to do the entire parking lot and site work. So our parking lot will be closed from June 3rd to about August 18th. In August and through November, we're going to be working on the interior of the new spaces, all the drywall and lighting and all the finishes there. We expect to complete this project by the end of 2019. So this is all due to the hard work of a lot of people that have spent many hours in thinking through this. Our chair, Jared Danford, John Burton, Stuart Kelly, Kay Olson, and Kathy Ratcliffe making up the rest of the building committee, with myself, the senior warden, and the junior warden serving ex officio. This project has been moving rapidly since we broke ground. This was the pouring of you can see after the pouring of the new foundation of the parish hall. There it is in the distance. And behind there you see the new offices of St. Albans when we purchased that house there on Waco. Here is the steel going up of the parish hall. Soon after that, we added the flooring and the roof decking of the space, and then we poured the concrete floor of the parish hall. This is the old parish hall. This is as it was coming down, cutting the roof off, and then cutting and tearing down the steel which supported. One of the things that has become clear throughout the construction process is how much this really was needed. This picture shows the attic of the parish house. The old parish house, again, built in the late 1940s. And you can see once we took the ceiling off and could look up into the attic, we saw some real serious structural problems. You can see their bowed rafters, those bent bowing rafters. That was all down the entire length of the building. And next to each one, you can see there a new solid 2x4 was added, much thicker, much stronger than what was originally used. You can see the huge piece of wood, that big board that says Boise Cascade. That's an enormous log, essentially, that is in there to support those structures, and we added those throughout the parish house as well, just to make sure it had the structural integrity going forward. You see there where it says Versa Lamb, and you look right above the word lamb, you see a dark board coming out of there. That was one of the original pieces of lumber there, and now there are 3 new pieces added to it, again, for structural strength and making sure the building lasts for a long, long time. Here's a picture of the parish hall or parish house as it was going up there in the center, the doorway into the parish welcome center there on the left, those 2 wide open windows of the new parlor, all connecting back to the old church building. On the far right, you can see the parish hall as that was going up. We've started putting that purple board, that exterior sheetrock going up. Eventually this will be covered with limestone and again look like the rest of our structure. Here's the parish hall as the metal studs were going up to frame out these spaces. A lot of this now has been covered with that purple board as well and is rapidly taking shape. So that's phase 1, Welcome Center, Parish Hall. What about phase 2? Well, phase 2 includes the new organ, includes new flooring, no more carpet, and improvements to the wall. Again, the floor and the walls, that's important acoustically for what we're trying to do in our space. Carpet and cinder block both deaden sound dramatically, and which is why you can hear our organ very well in the front, but by the time you get to the back, the sound has decayed so much you can't really hear it very well. A new electrical and lighting system, a new audio system, and carillon restoration and renovation of the narthex, which is the lobby of the church, and the sacristy, the place where the altar guild works and prepares the service. Now, there's a lot of question and concern about the organ. Some people say, why don't you renovate the one we have? Isn't it nice? And there are a lot of issues there. The organ committee has worked for a long time exploring all of this. We've had outside consultants look at the instrument, and they've all said the same thing, which is that it was an organ that essentially came off of the assembly line of the Reuter organ company in the 1950s when they were building one of these, 1 organ a week was getting installed. And it wasn't ideal for our space. It would cost a lot of money, well into the 6 figures, $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 and up, depending on what we were to do, to turn that organ and to repair it into something we would need for the future. And we would still end up with something that wasn't ideal for our space. And a lot of that is because of how it was put into the organ chamber. Here you can see our existing organ. And you can see as you walk past for communion, you've seen this, these are the small, higher pitched pipes that are in the front, which give sort of a harsh, shrill sound. And the much larger pipes, the ones that provide that full, rich sound that enables a lot of congregational singing, can make you feel like you're surrounded by this rich sound, and makes it so that you don't hear only your own voice as you sing, which a lot of people are nervous about. Those pipes are all in the very back of the chamber. You can't even see them in this picture. And so those pipes have to make sound that comes out of this chamber from the very back of it and then has to turn down the length of the church, which again is why when you're in the front of the church, when you're up taking communion, you'll notice sometimes you can hear the organ very well. But as you head back to the back of the church, to your seat, by the time you get to the back, you can't hear the organ very well at all. And when I leave church after service, the final blessing, and we head out with the choir and the clergy, by the time I get to the back of the church, I can no longer hear the organ very well. I can only hear my voice or the voices of the choir. But I notice that a lot of the congregation in the back is not singing, again, because Many people are insecure about their own voice, and if they can hear their voice, they're less likely to sing. So the organ does not currently serve us very well. Now here's an artist rendering of what the new organ might look like. This shows a beautiful design that preserves our existing wood carving, but brings that whole case further out into the space and rearranges the chamber so that the pipes that create the big, broad sound that fills the church are now better placed in a way that those sounds are in the space itself. There'd also be some changes to the rear gallery, the organ that's up in the balcony, to further enhance this sound that we want to make sure we can hear the organ through the whole space that enables both congregational singing and the kind of performance repertoire that we have with the Sacred Art series. There'd also be some changes on the inside instrument. Now this is our current organ chamber. It's sort of a bit of a tangled arrangement. It's difficult to access the pipes for tuning and for cleaning and for maintenance and all of that. It's a very difficult space to get around. It was not well designed. This is what an organ chamber is supposed to look like: clear access, accessibility, cleanliness, and so we would want something like that. Here's another artist drawing again of what that new instrument might look like, and we hope to be able to get there. So that's phase 2. What about phase 3? Well, as we've said, that's essentially the outreach center. That's the main part of it, complete renovation of that, putting the new offices on the second floor of the outreach center, of course, adding an elevator to that building, updating and renovating rooms for children and youth ministry, a chapel, as well as a possible community center or gymnasium in another part of the campus, a multi-use space. That's farther in the future down the road. So what would be the estimated investments for all of this? Well, for phase 1, we know that for construction, the property acquisition, the design and architectural and contractor fees, all of this is a $6 million project. We currently have gifts and pledges totaling $4.3 million, and we're excited about being able to complete this project. We know that additional pledges needed, as you can see there, to complete this as a project debt-free, $1.7 million. Right now we have wonderfully arranged funding from a local bank to finish this project, but additional pledges would allow us to pay off this debt quickly over the next 3 to 5 years. So 1.7 million to some people, if you're new to the church, may sound like a lot, or if you've been around for a while, it may sound like a lot. But it's something that we found in phase 1, for example, with the people who've already pledged, a lot of people pledging over a multi-year period, which is how this works. It's actually quite doable. So what does 1.7 million look like? Well, people, again, we've seen most of our members do a pledge over 5 years. Some have done 3 years, but a 3 to 5 year pledge. So if people did a 5-year pledge, that would be 90 households pledging $315 a month, or it would be 60 households pledging $472 a month, or 30 households pledging just under $1,000 a month. And we know not everybody can do that. So what we've seen in the past is this is a combination of giving levels. We see a lot of people giving larger amounts, humanly speaking, or smaller amounts, humanly speaking. We know that all those amounts are significant and meaningful, and all of it together combines into an amount that is doable. We think we can finish this project debt-free, as I said. Now, the 1.7 million is where we are right now. That's what we're looking for to complete phase 1 debt-free, and we will be approaching members of the congregation and inviting them to participate. Since we launched this project in 2016, there have been about 50 households join the church that were not there when we launched, and so we'll hopefully be inviting folks to participate in this project. Now, what does phase 2 look like? The organ, we have estimated at $1.5 million. The instrument itself is about 1.1 million, but we know that there's things we'll need to do to prepare the space, the removal of the old organ, preparing the church to receive the new one, as well as putting a contingency in there as well. So the organ is 1.5, but there's extra in there for those other things. The church improvements we estimate at $500,000. Again, that's currently an estimate. We bring in engineers and designers to help us think through exactly what is needed and the cost of it in the church. But this is the estimate at this point for a total estimated cost of $2 million. So that completes our presentation. Now, just to orient you, on the left here is the church building. You can realize you may have questions. We want to thank you for coming to this online presentation. If you do have questions, we encourage you to write to St. Albans at stalbanswaco.org. We'll put the link below. You can click on that and contact us, or you can speak to me, the rector, or any of the members of the vestry. We'd be happy to answer. The building committee as well would be happy to answer any questions you may have.